Hey guys, this is Mecha. Welcome to the 4th episode of Fire Emblem Pitfalls, the series where I try and clear up some misconceptions about Fire Emblem. Today, we're covering only one subject, but it's a big one. I'm going to attempt to win you over on some units that I feel have not been getting enough credit by Fire Emblem fans. Those units that a lot of people shove aside, be it because their builds don't look that good, because they require a bit more thought on how to use them, or just because they're filthy EXP stealing pre-promotes. There are units like these across the entire franchise, more than I can cover in a single video. So if there's a unit you feel is underrated, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll give them a second thought. I might be referencing some of the older Pitfalls episodes, so if you haven't watched those, definitely go check them out. Now since this is Pitfalls episode 4, it's only right that we look at some units from Fire Emblem 4. The star of Chalfie and FE4 in general is of course Sigurd, but his comrades don't get nearly as much love. For Arden, this is usually justified, because other than the power of pursuit, he can't really contribute much to your team. Alec and Noish, however, seem to get shoved aside quickly, sometimes as early as chapter 1. I can't blame anyone for doing this, since Alec and Noish get overshadowed by your other units quite easily. Their most glaring issue by far is offense. Noish does not have pursuit, so he does not double attack. Alec does double, but his strength is relatively low, so he's oftentimes not dealing much more damage in 2 hits than Noish is doing in 1. Once chapter 1 is over and FE4 enemies exchange their axes for lances, the Christmas Cavaliers lose their weapon triangle advantage, and now they're also less durable than you want them to be. Regardless of whether they use lances or swords, their avoid goes down the gutter, and you almost don't even want to bring them anymore. But there are fixes for Alec and Noish that will make them actual helpful members of your team. What Alec needs help with the most is raw power per hit. A start will be to exchange that dinky iron sword of his for a steel sword or even a hero sword. But that's not the only way. A little known fact about FE4 male paladins is that they get a huge +5 magic boost upon promoting. This is probably a side effect of the developers making the male paladin class bases equal to the female ones, the latter of which can use staves. Between his promotion bonus and a magic ring, Alec has a respectable 12 magic to work with after promotion. This gives him a surprisingly high 26th attack when he's using a magic sword like the Light Brand. In fact, 26th attack is roughly what Alec has with the steel sword at this point. What makes this combination even better is that FE4 enemies barely have any resistance. The gap between defense and resistance can be as big as 10 points, which means 20 extra damage when doubling with the Light Brand. If you can get Alec promoted by chapter 3, he can contribute quite a bit. It may require the use of the Paragon Ring, but it's not too difficult. Noish's needs are very different from Alec's. Raw power is not what he lacks, what he really needs is the power of pursuit. Thankfully, Arden finds exactly that on a beach in chapter 2. And by that time, Noish has had plenty of time collecting villages to amass the necessary 40,000 gold to afford it. Pursuit makes a world of difference for Noish, as it enhances all of his good points. His high strength now hits the enemies twice, charge will now add at least 2 attacks instead of 1, and he has 2 chances to critical. Now you might wonder why Alec and Noish would deserve all this special treatment over your other characters. The truth is that none of these resources I named are in very high demand. Sigurd certainly doesn't need any of them, and he's just about all you need to beat Generation 1 to begin with. The Pursuit Ring can be nice for Lewin or Ethlyn to pass down a leaf, but they are by no means necessary. Lewin has trouble getting to the thick of the battle to begin with, since he's not mounted, and he doesn't exactly need it to clear the arena. While Leaf is a great user of the Pursuit Ring, the same does not go for Ethlyn. She is a healer first and a combat unit second, so if you have Ethlyn buy the Pursuit Ring and leave with it after chapter 3, you really aren't making use of it in Generation 1. Without the Pursuit Ring, Leaf can still be fed kills fairly easily. He can even promote as early as chapter 7, as long as you give him enough sellable items to buy the Paragon Ring. If you want Lewin to pass down the Pursuit Ring to, say, Forseti Arthur, you can still have him buy it off Noish in chapter 5. The Light Sword is a nice weapon to give Gen 1 sword users 1-2 range, but as long as someone is gathering kills on it, it doesn't really matter who is using it. The Magic Ring is an even lower demand, as any tome-wielding character like Azel or Lewin is generally capable of 2-hit KOing enemies because of their low resistance. The only other character I could think of that might want to use a magic ring is Arenas, also known as Fury or Eren, when using the Wind Sword. So next time you're playing FE4, give one or both of these a spin. With the right resources, they might just surprise you. The next character that deserves more of your attention is Midir. The developers did a pretty good job of making Midir look weak in this game. The prologue literally starts with him getting wrecked by a scripted hand axe critical from Gandalf, which isn't even possible unless that hand axe had 50 kills on it. It doesn't help that they made him look like a bit of a wimp in his portrait, like he's always looking down and sulking. Enemies love attacking Midir, sometimes even at 2 range if they can, as if they're playground bullies and Midir is their easy target. Then Jamka shows up in chapter 1, he frees the girl that Midir couldn't even protect, and he looks so much better with that killer bow of his. He's one of the few people who poses a threat to Sigurd of all people, and once you recruit him, he can take down all those hunters near Verdane Castle on his own. Midir's probably still struggling to make it through the Spirit Forest by the time Sigurd is seizing the castle. Looks can be deceiving though. Midir is much more useful than the game makes him appear. The first thing you have to keep in mind is that the killer bow is not Jamka's personal weapon. It's free for him to use because he comes with it, but it can just as easily be sold to Midir through the pawn shop, although it does cost a bit of gold to do so. I'm also going to argue that while Jamka's stats are higher than Midir's, Midir makes much better use of the killer bow and is in fact a better unit than Jamka and a lot of other Fire Emblem 4 units. So first off, Midir is mounted. This cannot be emphasized enough. Midir has 8 movement, whereas Jamka and other foot units have 6 or even 5. The most obvious advantage to this is that Midir can keep up with Sigurd better, giving him a much better piece of the action in a map like chapter 2. But there are so many more pros. He can attack and then move out of enemy range, which is crucial for bow users. He is much better suited for doing side jobs like saving villages, and when traveling on a road, Midir's movement is effectively 11 to Jamka's 8. This means that over the course of 3 turns of moving forward, Midir can be as many as 9 tiles ahead of your infantry. Because Midir doesn't have to end his turn on the tile where he attacks, it's much easier for him to take advantage of perks like Charm, Sigurd's leadership, dancing, and sometimes terrain. And since he attacks from 2 range, he is very flexible from where he attacks. For all these reasons, Midir is going to attack much more often than Jamka, so it makes sense to give him the better weapon. Now let's talk about Midir's stats. His growth rates are pretty bad, but if you've been following Pitfalls then you know growths don't say all that much about a unit. Look at what Midir has in store at base level, without any training whatsoever. He's got 9 speed, or 6 AS with a killer bow. In most games this would be mediocre at best, but in FE4, very few enemies have more than 0 AS to begin with. Jamka has this much AS with any bow other than killer, and no one's complaining about him being too slow. The sword fighters in chapter 2 are some of the fastest enemies in generation 1, and they only have 5 attack speed. Since you only need 1 more attack speed to double in FE4, base level Midir can double these with the killer bow. With that same killer bow, Midir also sports 23 base attack, which will 3-hit KO most early game enemies. He has a 7% chance to critical per attack, as well as a variable chance to activate charge. If he's at full HP and he has 4 more attack speed than the enemy, which is a generous estimate, he has about a 20% chance to do so. Even if Midir doesn't activate either of these skills, he provides some pretty good chip damage that allows someone else to finish the enemy off, usually without taking a counterattack. He's not a fighting machine like Sigurd, but that doesn't mean he's not helpful. Now Midir's performance relative to the enemies stays roughly like this. He deals a bit less damage per hit against armor knights, but on the other hand he automatically criticals every flying enemy you face. In chapter 4, if you pair Midir with Aidin, which you should, he gets access to the hero bow. This lets him quadruple enemies and takes away the only edge Jamka has on him skill wise in Adapt. Midir is not a unit that will solo entire armies, but he makes for a great supporting attacker with little to no opportunity cost. No matter which map you're playing, you can count on Midir to help out. This makes him much more helpful than infantry units like Ira, Holden, Lewin, and Jamka, since they will usually be late to the party no matter where on the map you send them. Alec and Noish deserve respect for the same reason. Having a mount is so important in FE4. It tends to be the difference between mattering and not mattering. That's why experienced players tend to say that movement is the best stat. FE4 is mostly about nobles, with their holy blood and their crusader weapons, but in that rush for high stats and big weapons, we often forget about the little man. A loyal knight who is there to support their lord through thick and thin, who can actually contribute when given a chance. A lot of people like Finn for these reasons, and he deserves that love. But let's show some for Alec, Noish, and Midir, because they're often getting the shaft for no good reason. That's it for this episode of Fire Emblem Pitfalls. Give these units a go next time you're playing FE4, or if you haven't played FE4 yet, you should. I even wrote a helpful guide to help you get into it. Thanks a lot to everyone who has watched and supported FE Pitfalls, and I'll see you guys next time.